Today, we're diving into one of the most foundational Supreme Court cases in all of American history. And trust me, this isn't some dry, dusty legal proceeding. It's a political thriller full of bitter rivalries, a last-minute power grab, and a twist ending so brilliant it literally redefined the balance of power in the United States. So let's get into it. It all comes down to this question. Seriously. The whole story kicks off with a guy named William Marbury, who got a job but never actually received the paperwork. It sounds like a pretty small-time problem, right? But this one little dispute quickly spiraled into a massive constitutional showdown. And it forced the Supreme Court to answer the biggest question of all: who really has the final say on what the law is? All right, to get what's happening here, we have to rewind the clock. We need to go back to the year 1800, and let me tell you, it was not a calm or friendly time in American politics. I mean, you've really got to picture the chaos. The sitting president, John Adams, and his whole party just lost an incredibly nasty election to their arch-rival, Thomas Jefferson. So what do? Before they get kicked out of office, Adams and his allies in Congress scramble to hold on to some shred of power. They create a bunch of new judge positions and start filling them with their own party loyalists. We're talking about Adams literally signing job offers in the final hours of his presidency. They became known as the Midnight Judges. And guess who was one of them? William Marbury. Now, as you can probably imagine, this last-second rush to hand out jobs created a bit of a mess. The jobs were official, the ink on the signatures was dry, but in the frantic changeover of power, not all the official paperwork, the commissions, actually got delivered. And this is exactly where things get interesting. Marbury's commission was signed by President Adams. It had the official seal of the United States on it. Legally speaking, the job was his. Period. But when Thomas Jefferson's administration walked in the door, the new Secretary of State, a guy named James Madison, found Marbury's undelivered commission sitting on a desk. And under orders from Jefferson, he just didn't deliver it. He left Marbury with the title, but no way to actually start his job. So Marbury sues, and the case lands in front of the Supreme Court, which is now in an absolutely impossible position. Think about it. This is a huge political trap for the Chief Justice, John Marshall. If the court orders Madison to deliver the commission, President Jefferson will almost certainly just ignore them, making the court look totally powerless. But if they rule in favor of Madison, they look weak, like they just caved to the president. It was a total lose-lose. So what on earth do you do when every choice you have leads to failure? Well, if you're John Marshall, you don't pick option 1 or option 2. You create a third option that nobody even saw coming. Instead of jumping into that political boxing match, Marshall completely changes the game. He's a genius. He sidesteps the whole confrontation by breaking the case down into 3 very simple, logical questions. This framework was absolutely brilliant. He lays it all out step by step. Question 1, does Marbury even have a legal right to this job in the first place? Question 2, if he does have a right, and that right has been violated, does the law actually offer him a solution? And finally, question 3, is that solution a direct order, what's called a writ of mandamus, from the Supreme Court itself? You can see how he's building his argument piece by piece. All right, so for that first question, the court's answer was a huge, emphatic yes. Marshall's opinion was clear. The appointment became official the second President Adams put his signature on it. The physical delivery of the paper, that was just a formality. So by withholding it, Madison was, and I'm quoting the court here, violating a vested legal right. And for the second question, is there a legal solution for Marbury? Again, the court says yes. And this is where Marshall drops this iconic line. He's basically saying that the whole point of living in a free country is that if you have a legal right and someone violates it, the law has to give you a way to fix it. Otherwise, we're not a country ruled by laws anymore. We're a country ruled by the whims of powerful people. Okay, so right now, things are looking great for William Marbury. The court has said he has a right to the job, and he has a right to a legal remedy. It really seems like they're just about to order James Madison to hand over that commission. But this is where the genius twist comes in. This right here was Marshall's checkmate move. The final question flipped everything on its head. He stopped asking if the court should help Marbury and started asking if the court constitutionally could help him. He brilliantly turned this little case about one man's job into a massive question about the Supreme Court's own power. So here's the legal conflict he uncovered. There was a law that Congress had passed, the Judiciary Act of 1789, that seemed to give the Supreme Court the power to issue these kinds of orders. But Marshall put that law side by side with the U.S. Constitution itself, which has very specific rules about what cases the Supreme Court can hear first. And what he found was the law passed by Congress and the Constitution didn't match up. And that led to this bombshell conclusion from the court. Marshall pointed out that Congress had tried to give the Supreme Court a power that the Constitution, the highest law in the land, had never actually given it. And with that, the verdict was sealed. The Supreme Court ruled that the section of the law that would have allowed them to help Marbury was void. It was unconstitutional. They essentially told him, look, we'd love to help you, but the law that says we can is actually illegal. This was the very first time in American history that the Supreme Court struck down an act of Congress. So in this one specific fight, Marbury lost. He never got his job. But by doing this, by declaring that law unconstitutional, the Supreme Court won a much bigger war. It established a power that would define its role forever. And that massive power is called judicial review. It is, without a doubt, the greatest power the Supreme Court has. It's the idea that the courts can look at laws passed by Congress or actions taken by the president, and if they violate the Constitution, the court can strike them down. And here's the craziest part. This power isn't actually written down in the Constitution. John Marshall basically created it out of thin air in this very case. So why does this matter so much? Well, judicial review does a few huge things. First, it cements the Constitution as the absolute supreme law of the land. Nobody is above it, not even Congress or the president. Second, it makes the Supreme Court the final referee on what the Constitution actually means. And third, it creates the system of checks and balances that we all learn about in school. It's truly the foundation of the court's power. The irony here is just incredible. Marshall basically gave President Jefferson the small political win he wanted. Marbury went home empty-handed. But in exchange for losing that one little battle, Marshall claimed this enormous, sweeping power for the court. He transformed it from being the weakest branch of government into a truly co-equal, powerful player. In the end, it all comes back to this one iconic line from Marshall's opinion. With these words, he wasn't just deciding a case, he was defining the very soul of the American judicial system. He declared that the court's job isn't just to apply laws, but to interpret them, to guard the Constitution, and to have the ultimate say in what the law is. And to think, this incredible legacy was all born from one man's missing job offer.